And we're live. Greetings, friends. Welcome to Sinister Sundays, where we investigate the unusual, the unexpected, and the unknown. How is everyone? 7 viewers in the chat. Welcome, friends. J Lash with the thumbs ups. Appreciate you. David and Chrissy are here. Thank you so much for being here early. David says, JL. For J Lash, Miko is here, newly minted mod. Miko says, good morning / evening, Super Antonio and Sadie, mods and everyone. Hope everyone's okay with you all. And David has a Miko and a alligator emoticon. Miko says hello to J Lash, Davey, and Chrissy. Enzuyu8 says hi, greetings, friend. Welcome. Happy Sunday. Chrissy says, good evening to everyone. And Odog is here. Odog says, hi, Davy boy. Hi, Mrs. Davy boy. Well done, Odog. Appreciate you, friend. Tonight, we are going to be reading the most popular or upvoted ghost stories on Reddit. They say they're true. It's supposed to be like, it's impossible to tell if these are real or not. But they are, I haven't actually, I skimmed a couple of them and they're interesting. But it's eyewitness testimony. Odog says, it would be great if my sinuses would quit acting like a monkey after 6 p.m. Well, we're hoping for you, Odog. I left a post for Serena on the channel commentary page, community page, saying that she needs our prayers and thoughts. So if you could keep her in your hearts, I know she'd appreciate it. I'd certainly appreciate it. Sadie here would appreciate it. Enzu8 says, is there a way to become a channel mod? Not right now. Currently not accepting applications, Enzu8, but I appreciate you wanting to be one. Hang out and let's see where it goes. Odog answered that question quite succinctly. We are full at the moment, but it takes lots of attendance and good behavior. Yes, very well said, Odog. Thank you, friend. The rules are no fiction, no self-promotion and outside links. I like that one. No bullying, harassment, and trolling. No sleep paralysis stories. There's an entirely different section for that. Stay on topic and follow the Reddit content policy. Odog says, of course, Super Antonio. I was here last night. Yeah, that was the longest stream in the history of the channel. It was ridiculous. And it is currently demonetized. What's that about? I challenged it, of course. I didn't think I said anything naughty or egregious. And there's no copyright on the script. So I don't know what the problem is. Odog says, very long but good reading. Yeah, I was wiped out at the end. I was delirious, and I was super hungry. We ate peanut butter crackers after it, almost immediately after I after I quit the screen. Yeah, I didn't think it would take that long, but I enjoyed it. I really did. It's like I want to do something similar. Maybe just read shorter stories. At any rate, speaking of stories, let's start with Christian is Lost, which has 1.8K upvotes, and it's called The White Witch. Oh, and the slideshow tonight is just a bunch of my favorite ghost movies. Bazzaro's here. Bazzaro says, drive. I was there, but driving, so I couldn't talk. Help me finish my drive. Oh, I'm glad you were there, Bazzaro, and that's exactly how I want people to enjoy the stream, those long streams. Just listen and enjoy. Ben says, "Good old Reddit. Don't scroll too far in there. No, the ghost stories." Okay, this one is called The White Witch. In the early 80s, I lived in Okinawa, Japan. My dad thought that seeing the world would be an adventure that would help my brother and I become better men, and I have to say, I think he was right. Being in the military showed me cultures many would never get to experience, and I am thankful for every experience that life gave to me, even the scary ones. When we lived in Japan, my father wanted us to have a fully immersive experience, so he chose to move us into a small Japanese neighborhood off base. We lived in a little house at the top of an enormous hill in a cul-de-sac that overlooked, I kid you not, part of a huge zoo and on one side a fairly large cemetery. Our particular house was set far above the monkey habitats about a mile downhill. Between us and those habitats was nothing but thick Indiana Jones-style jungle. Jungle the neighborhood kids and I would tromp through endlessly, ignoring the local warnings about poisonous snakes and ancient untripped mines from World War II. We were the only American family living in that cul-de-sac, completely surrounded by Japanese families, and it was amazing. The kids loved us, and although we couldn't communicate through language very well, we understood each other perfectly. Well, most of the time. Opposite us was an older couple with a lush garden surrounding their property. The older woman wanted us to call her Mama-san, and she had us helping her garden whenever she could coax us over with green tea and chocolate banana cookies. We loved her. She was so welcoming and generous, as was everyone else, actually. We lived in a wonderful neighborhood. The only drawback to Mama-san's home, however, was that she directly overlooked the cemetery, and that cemetery was unlike any cemetery I had ever seen before. Because Okinawa is an island, burials don't happen very often. Instead, above-ground crypts are built, many of them built into the sides of the hills that make up the island. The crypts are large, made of huge arcs of polished stone set over a large square of stone, which has a square insert cut in the middle of it for the coffin to be placed inside. Once inside the square is inset with another piece of polished stone just inside, leaving a kind of shelf on the outside so offerings could be made to lost loved ones. Yen, food, flowers, incense are some of the offerings given. Below Mama-san's house was a valley that swooped back up into another hill opposite her home. This is beautifully written, I have to say. That valley and both hills were covered with these crypts, and spider webbing up and down through the crypts were various stone step pathways that were old and badly maintained. It was quite a sight. One evening, Mama-san asked me to come over and visit with her alone. She had something to show me, but it was only for me as the older brother. Intrigued and a bit proud, I agreed. She took me to the back of her garden and sat me on a thick wooden bench that was carved with scenes of fishermen and men with swords, and she told me she had a story to tell. Mama-san then disappeared for a few minutes and soon returned with a tray that held hot green tea and sweet rice cakes. I love sweet rice cakes. Sitting next to me, she smiled and commented on the colors of the evening sky as the sun began to lower. Mama-san said she had seen me, my brother, and some other kids daring each other to follow a stairway path down into the cemetery. You have to understand, the path from our little home area down to the cemetery consisted of hundreds of steps, many broken or cracking, in and out of bushes, and at a steep incline. It would be dangerous for anyone, but the real test was seeing how long we could take walking through the crypts at night. Mama-san wanted to explain why that was a bad idea. Many years ago, during the war, the Americans were thought to be devils, monsters that would murder innocent citizens for no reason other than to kill. That fear was the product of wartime propaganda used to encourage young men to military service and farmers to fight alongside them. But many didn't. Many ran, and with nowhere to go, nowhere to hide, hundreds of Japanese citizens hurled themselves off a cliffside rather than face torture at the hands of their perceived enemy. I was terrified at hearing this. I had no idea that had happened. I was mortified and hit with such sadness, I started to cry. The sun was setting and the sky went from pink and blue to a deep orange and red. Mama-san reached out and held my hand and telling me not to worry. This was in the past, and the past is something we must always remember so we never go back. She went on with her story. One young woman had followed through with this sacrifice with her 2 children, but she survived the fall. She was in a coma for months. When she did regain consciousness, she was horrified to realize that she was not with her children. They had been buried somewhere in that cemetery in an unmarked crypt that held many others. The woman would spend days and nights searching the cemetery, crying in pain, the torment of her loss unbearable. One day, she threw herself into the ocean, hopefully to be reunited with her lost family. But they say she never found her children. Her act of self-cancellation doomed her to purgatory. She would remain tortured for eternity. The sun had disappeared, the cemetery drowned in inky blackness, the main path dotted with dim, broken lights, feebly illuminating small areas. Mama-san continued. She still wanders the cemetery, she said, looking for her children. You can hear her crying. And then she pointed down. I didn't want to look, but I did. I looked. In the back of the cemetery, in the darkness, there was a white figure. At first, a bright white shimmer, moving slowly, kind of shaking. It moved from side to side. I've got goosebumps. Like it was moving among the crypts, and you could actually hear the crying. Softly at first, but then low moans and whispers of pain as it got closer. I was terrified. I wanted to run, but Mama-san held my hand and whispered that she wouldn't come up here. We were too far. But that is why we shouldn't go down there after dark. She said many don't know her story and call her the White Witch, which angers her. It is best to stay away. It's best to pray for her. Mama-san said she comes out to see her often, hoping one day she will find her salvation. Needless to say, I never went down to that cemetery, not once. And I never sat back there with Mama-san again either. That was enough for me. I did, however, visit Self-Cancellation Hill. It's called Peace Prayer Park now out of respect. I cried the whole time we were there. I prayed for all the souls and for forgiveness. So many Japanese citizens spoke to us, welcoming us, telling us stories, sharing with us. I didn't feel worthy, and my love for the country and its people was overwhelming. I'll never forget my time there. I'd like to go back to see if she's still there, wandering the graves, looking for her children. Well, that was pretty cool. But it's so well written that always, it's like just the fact that it was so well written, that's why it has 1.8 thousand upvotes. But just that very fact makes it a little sus in my mind. Even though, I've had paranormal experience, many people in this chat have had paranormal experiences. But, it's unreliable eyewitness testimony. And I'm always a skeptic, even seeing what I have seen with my own eyes. I don't know, it's just my nature. Moving on to the next one. Which has 1.3 K upvotes. Bought my first house and found out it was haunted. And Odog, I have some screen grabs from Beetlejuice in this slideshow, I believe. I should. I bought my first house in 2003 and was over the moon. Shortly after moving in, 2 of my neighbors began joking with me about the ghost in the house. Well, I thought they were joking. So I just played along, pretending I'd seen one, and it was no big deal. Well, as time went on that summer, I met more and more of my neighbors, and they all brought up the same topic. Finally, an elderly woman on the block, who was quite kind and friendly, told me the story after I'd asked her. I knew she wasn't going to screw with my head, which is why I asked her in the first place. Turned out the previous owner purchased the home and never lived there because she said it was haunted. Sounds in the night of footsteps and sobbing, and glimpses of a man sitting in the kitchen, covered in blood. One of my neighbors helped with the renovations of the house and said that he was putting up drywall when he felt something lift up his dreadlocks. Though I've had paranormal experiences before, it had been years, and by then I just chalked it up to night terrors. One day, I went to a small neighborhood store to rent a movie. I had to fill out a form with my demographic data and then my credit card info. The owner of the store looked at the form and said, "Oh God, you live in that house." I asked her what she meant, and she explained that her former employee had committed self-cancellation in my house. She came to the house as soon as she'd heard, but the house had been taped off by police as a potential crime scene. She told me that he had just moved into the house with his partner and called his mom because he wanted to invite her over to meet his partner and come out to her. This was in the 90s when being gay was a big deal. His mother already knew he was gay because he bought a house with a man and disowned him right over the phone. That same week, he received a letter from an HIV testing center stating that he had been tested positive for HIV. This was when HIV was a death sentence. He then sat at the kitchen table, ate a bowl of cereal, and used a handgun. Since then, she has had multiple paranormal experiences in the store, with videos flying off shelves and even levitating off shelves. The most I have experienced is sounds at night, sounds of Cheerios being poured into a bowl. I don't eat cereal, and sounds of sobbing in the kitchen. I often awaken to both. I remember my grandmother saying, "When the dead come to you, they want something. Perform an act of charity in their name and pray for them." So I did. I sat down at the kitchen table one night and lit a candle and told them that each night I would recite a novena prayer for him before a lit candle. On the 9th night of the first novena to St. Anthony, a patron saint of lost souls, I heard uncontrollable sobbing. I felt a strong presence of grief and despair and the sound of hyperventilating breathing, as though someone could not catch their breath. I sat in the presence of this knowing it was not malignant, but rather a connection of intimacy and compassion, of which he was in need. For 45 days I said a novena prayer before a lit candle for his soul, and had a mass said in his name. A few times I had awakened to feel his presence standing over my bed, but I knew it was not a malignant presence. This still happens from time to time, but less and less frequently. Interesting, she never moved out of the house. Chrissy B says, Tim Burton. Yes, I do. Tim Burton used to be one of my favorite directors, in high school. But I grew out of him. I think he's just over-commercialized. But, I really liked his movies at one point. And I'm still very sentimental about them. Oh, speaking of movies, this Wednesday's Western Wednesday will be Pale Rider, Chrissy, for your lovely husband who requested it. And then next Wednesday, we're going to do Blazing Saddles. What's that about? And to be honest, I'm far more looking forward to Blazing Saddles than I am Pale Rider. But, Pale Rider does... Clint Eastwood does very well on this channel. The next one is from Tink the Chai from 2 years ago. It has 1.3 thousand upvotes. And it's titled, My Husband Died in 2020. After he died, I found out a series of very unpleasant things about him. It was devastating and took me more than 3 years to come to grips with it. He died in August of 2020, and I sold our condo in June of 2021. He had renovated the entire condo, kitchen, both bathrooms, flooring, trim, doors, everything. It took nearly 3 years. I have 2 small dogs, and when the realtor told me someone was coming to see the property, I took the dogs, locked the door, and went outside. The realtor told me to be out for about 30 minutes. After that period of time, I went back upstairs. The door was locked. I entered, and when I did, it looked as if people had been there. Doors were moved. The laundry doors were wide open. I had closed them. They were barn doors. I do like those sliding barn doors. I want to put those in here. I then got a text from the realtor asking me why I didn't put the key in the lockbox on the main floor outside. The people couldn't get in with the realtor. I'll be honest, I was in a very bad place after he died, particularly after what I found, and thinking in detail was not something I was doing. I went to the main washroom and saw that the bath mat was sitting over the tub, not the way I left it. I touched it and felt water, almost as if someone had got out of the shower and had been standing on it. It was a fairly big apartment, 2 bedrooms and an office. When the dogs and I were in bed at night, I could hear noises in the kitchen after he died at night. I was too afraid to get out of bed. It was a concrete building, and we couldn't usually hear anything people were doing in the apartments near us, so hearing something was very unusual. I moved in June of 2021 to a new condo. The first night I was alone. The dogs were being taken care of. I was laying in bed, not asleep, laying on my side at the edge. I felt someone brush past me. My hair actually moved. It scared the hell out of me. I lay there for a few minutes, afraid to move. Finally, I moved again, recently, far from where I had been living. Last Christmas Eve, I was in bed. My bedroom door was open, and I clearly heard 3 knocks on the door. It happened twice. That also really scared me. I have never been one to think of the spirit world until recently. Last Christmas, I made statements out loud and told him to leave me alone. So far, all has been good. The last 4 years have been a real ride. That one feels real to me, feels authentic. The ones that are subtle, to me, have more veracity, because if it's it's not as dramatic as the movies make out to be a ghost sighting, in my experience. Movies always amp it up, and it's always a little sus if someone tells me a ghost story / experience that sounds like it could be in a movie, because to me that means they're just trying to fool you, or looking for attention, craving attention or internet clout, like Munchausen by proxy, but Ghosthausen by proxy. Cloudy is here. Greetings, Cloudy. We're reading ghost stories. What's that about? My trip to the slaughter yard, a story my mom wouldn't tell me until my 30s. And it's unknown, by someone named Unknown. It's got 1,000 upvotes. So let me start by saying I enjoy writing, so this will be long. It is nonfiction though, but will hopefully be an interesting read. I also admit that I have absolutely no memory of this experience. I was a little over 2 years old and just starting to walk on my own when this event took place. My mom only told me this story around 3 years ago when I was 32 and about to get married. My mother was raised in a very fundamentalist Christian community and had no belief in the paranormal. She believed that our souls sleep until Judgment Day, or something like this. Ergo, there are no ghosts or spirits to haunt houses. Even over 30 years later, she still sounded terrified as she told me this. The woman, who always talks way too loud and literally whispering by the end of it, and she was white as a sheet. I believed her completely and still do. My mom never talks about stuff like this. I'm just glad I can't remember it. In 1988, my parents had their second child. This was my brother, Victor, an alias. We were very crowded in our rented flat with 2 babies. My parents decided to move to a rambling old 2-story farmhouse on a 7-acre plot in southern Ohio for more room for the family. It was way out in the sticks and took almost an hour to get to town from there. My mom said the first time I saw the house, I freaked out. I was crying and saying things like, "Don't like mean house, ugly house, don't like, scary house, mama, don't like." My mom says this behavior was very out of character for me, but I stopped complaining about the house after a few weeks, so she chalked it up to the stress of the move. Now this house was ramshackle and in the middle of nowhere. The kitchen was to the far rear of the house, and until recently, before we moved in, still had a working ancient wood-burning cooking stove against the back wall. This had caught the back wall on fire a couple of months before we moved in and caused a lot of damage. A lot of this damage wasn't fixed, so my young, broke parents got a very cheap rent agreement. Gotta love the 80s. On the second floor, directly above the kitchen, was a locked room. The landlord claimed it had heavy fire damage, but her son, who had done the repairs, claimed the only fire damage was left in the kitchen since it had been the worst and was beyond his skill level to fix. Either way, the landlord was adamant that the room was off limits, and my parents always respected that. I would have looked 100%. I know all this because I heard stories about the crappy farmhouse with the creepy door all my whole life, and there were pictures of us in and around the farmhouse. The locked door was right next to the upstairs landing, so there was no avoiding it, and both my parents had told me it gave them the creeps. I would have looked in there too. I'm not going to move in there, and there's like a room you're not allowed to go in. What's that about? I don't care what the rent is. A few months after we moved in, my mother and I were in the yard with our Pit/Doberman mix, Boss. She was hanging laundry and I was rolling around with the dog. She said, just as she noticed that everything was way too silent, Boss started going crazy from surprisingly far away. About 500 yards from the house on the left, there was a small duck pond. Boss was in between the two, running towards my mom, then turning and running back towards the pond, barking frantically the whole time. My mom saw something thrashing around in the middle of the pond. She took off towards the water full speed. Boss beat her there and dragged me out of the water himself. "Thank you, pupper. Love you." Although my mom was confused how I got so far so fast and how I got to the center of the pond, since it was over my head and I couldn't swim. She figured she underestimated me and brought me in the baby gates and playpens. I had to be contained from now on. I'm getting the goosebumps again. A few weeks later, she was cooking downstairs. Boss was outside. Victor, asleep in his crib, and I was in my playpen in my room upstairs. I also had a gate on my door and one at the top of the stairs. My father had a similar story to this that I might tell you later. The stairs ran up from the side of the kitchen, so my mom said she could listen for us crying or fussing while cooking. My mom said no longer than 15 minutes after the last time she looked in on us kids, Boss started going crazy again in the yard. She runs to check on us. Victor's still sleeping. Every baby gate is shut and locked, but I am not in my room. A frenzied search reveals I'm not in the house at all. A sudden image of Boss saving me from drowning causes my mom to rush outside to see what he's trying to tell her this time. She said he was running circles in the yard, barking uncontrollably. When she got outside, he took off towards the light, away from the pond. He would run, turn around, and bark at my mother, wait for her to catch up a little before racing off again. He ended up leading her almost 1.5 miles out onto the dirt road that separated our property from our neighbors. He led her to a thick stand of trees on our neighbor's side of a rocky drive. She said what hit her first was the foul stench of advanced decay. She plowed into the trees with her heart in her throat and her stomach full of ice. She said she noticed many piles of uncorrugated tin, tarps, tires, and other debris. The miasma was emanating most strongly from these junkyard cairns. Peeking under a sheet of tin, she discovered the extremely decomposed corpse of a butchered cow. As she headed deeper into the thicket where the tree's cover was denser, she said less care was taken to cover the remains. Grisly pieces of bones and rotted chunks of bovine littered the area. Apparently, our neighbor, in an effort to cheat his taxes, had been illegally slaughtering cattle and hiding the remains in and at least one of the few thick stands of trees around. She found me in the dead center of this thicket, just standing there looking around like I was confused, surrounded by carnage. She said I didn't seem scared or anything, just standing. She rushed over to me, and after ascertaining that I wasn't injured, began questioning me on why I was here, how I got there, etc. Keep in mind, although my mother said I started speaking very young, I still didn't have much of a vocabulary. She said I told her, with that serious look only small children can give, that the children had brought me here. Afraid at the thought that anyone, even children, I'm censoring the obscenities, could walk right past her through the kitchen, get me from upstairs, and walk right back past her on the way down to the stairs and out with me, she demanded to know what children and where the heck they are now. I looked at her, dead serious, and told her the ones that live with us in the room at the top of the stairs, and that I didn't see them anymore. After a moment of stunned silence, she started asking all kinds of questions about these children. However, she told me that I refused to say anything else. She said as long as she questioned me about what happened, I would just stand there staring at her with a serious expression and my mouth closed. She said this same pattern held true every other time she brought it up to me. So she was always left wondering and immediately began hounding my dad about moving closer to town. While the incident was with me getting to the pond was highly unlikely, it was at least remotely possible. My mother is adamant that me being in the hidden slaughter yard that day was flat impossible. She says there is no way I could have ever known I was out there, much less have the ability to open and relock the baby gates, get downstairs, past her, and end up almost 2 miles down the road, and in this place in under 15 minutes. I was only 2 and as slow and as clumsy as most toddlers. As I said, she is still shaken by it after 30 years. Personally, I have no idea what happened that day. I've thought about hypnosis, but I haven't yet decided. I really don't want to remember. Maybe it's better to let it be a mystery, because whatever those things were, I really don't think they were children. Mama One's here. Everyone say hi to Mama One. And Papa One. Greetings, Mama One and Papa One. We're doing ghost stories tonight. What's that about? Levi, I blocked you last night because I felt you were doing a little too much self-promotion of your channel. And that's very distracting for me. And I believe it's very distracting for the chat. And if you want to do something like that, you need a bigger platform. And I just don't like that in my chat. I allow a little bit of it, and I allow people like Serena to promote their channel. It's my way of paying her for for her work, her hard work as a mod for you guys. And I'll allow a little bit of it with everyone else, but you can't go nuts. Don't take advantage of my generosity. And you're on probation. Same with you, Benz. Mama 1, what's for dinner? And Papa 1, what's for dinner? Hodog says fruit, especially bananas, raspberries, blueberries, and avocados, all extremely good for the heart. I love all those fruits. Levi, you don't have to apologize. You never have to apologize on this channel. Just hang out and talk. Talk. Be real. And just enjoy the chat. The next one is from PKP434. It has 877 upvotes, and it's called My Daughter's Imaginary Friend. In 2013, my wife and I divorced, and we both moved into separate houses. The divorce went well, and we are still good friends to this day, partly because we have a daughter together. We agreed to split custody over our daughter, and I rented an old house in a historic district in the city where we live. It was a very pretty home, built in 1935, and kept up very well. I would have my daughter 2 weeks at a time, and she had a bedroom in the back of the house. She was 3 years old at the time, and I kept noticing her talking to a friend. One day, I found her in a little closet, talking to someone. This seems a little sus, because I know this scene from Paranormal Activity and American Horror Story. This scene comes up a lot in movies and TV. The little girl talking to an imaginary friend, aka a ghost, in a little closet. Anyways, we'll go on. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt. And I remember her saying she was talking to another little girl named Betty. I have no idea where she heard the name Betty, and she was only 3 years old, but I just chalked it up to a child's vivid imagination. Keep in mind, I am a single dad to a little girl. I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to dressing her, hair, or just little girl stuff in general. Her mother is good at that stuff, but not me. I put my daughter to bed one night after her bath. I remember brushing her hair that night, but that was all I did. The very next morning, her mom came to pick her up from my house, and my daughter was just waking up. Her mom went back to her bedroom to find my daughter's hair was fixed in 2 perfect French braids. Her mom was real proud of me at first that I had done her hair so cute, but I told her I didn't and couldn't do that. I can't even braid her hair, much less do perfect French braids. We asked our daughter how her hair got fixed, and she told us Betty had done it during the night. I broke the contract on the rental agreement and moved out within the next month. Okay, I mean, it's a good story. I don't know if it's true or not. Mom once says we had roast beef, potatoes, carrots, onions, all homegrown vegetables. I made cornbread, biscuit with homemade jam, and a slice of apple pie with homemade ice cream. And David had spaghetti and salad. That's my favorite, salad spaghetti. And Odog had grilled brisket and taters, and Levi had orange chicken and fried rice. My auntie loves orange chicken. I had teriyaki salmon with veggies. It was delicious. The next one is from a Reddit user named Abby Kadabi, and it's entitled "My Grandma's House is Haunted, but We're Not Allowed to Tell Her." My grandma's house has always, for as long as I can remember, been a scary place. My dad and aunt and uncle grew up in the house and had paranormal experiences occur throughout their lives. One example was when my dad and uncle were teenagers. My uncle was walking down the steps and swinging a towel as he had just washed his hair. Out of nowhere, my dad, who was standing in the living room at the bottom of the stairs, saw the towel straighten out in front of my uncle as if someone had pulled it, and my uncle fell forcefully down the stairs. Now, my grandma hates all things paranormal, especially Ouija boards, and she would often visit gypsies. So it is a big no-no in our family to discuss the paranormal events that occur in her house. I don't understand the gypsy part of that sentence. 20 years ago or so, my cousins and brothers were playing in the upstairs bedrooms of my grandparents' house. The toys were set up in the room across from the hall, and they were all in the same bedroom playing a board game. Out of nowhere, a Hot Wheels car, no batteries, no wind-up, just an average Hot Wheels car, slowly exited the room that the toys were in, went across the hall and into the room they were all sitting. Needless to say, they were all terrified. Around 8 years ago, my oldest brother moved into the basement of their house. One night he was home. He woke up out of a deep sleep, having felt he was shaken by someone. That happened to me once. He stood up and instantly smelled gas. He went upstairs and outside of the house. Later, he found out there was a carbon monoxide leak, and if he had not woken up, there's a big chance he could have died in his sleep. Months after that, my grandparents were away for the weekend, and the family decided to try the Ghost Radar app in their house. I've never heard of that app. We all sat around the phone, and my uncle asked normal questions. Is anyone here? Blah, blah. Then he asked who used to live in the basement. At this point, my brother had moved out. The Ghost Radar replied with my brother's full name, which no one ever calls him. We were shocked. So my uncle asked, how did you save my brother? It replied, wake. He then asked, what did you save him from? And it said, gas. Bruh. Needless to say, we were shocked. The last thing that I'm going to talk about that happens in the house is my grandparents' friend's obituary, who passed away 15 years ago, will show up in their kitchen every month or so. They usually say hello to their friend and put the obituary back in the basement where it is supposed to stay, LOL. A little later, it will show back up in the kitchen. Sorry, that was long, but there's more stories. Levi asks, Super Antonio, what's your favorite horror movie? I have so many, Levi. I could give you a top 10. I'll tell you that every ghost movie mentioned in the slideshow is one of my favorites. And next Saturday, we are going to be discussing The Shining from 1980. Stanley Kubrick is one of my favorite directors. And technically, even though it was directed by Robert Rodriguez, speaking of favorite directors, Quentin Tarantino's From Dusk Till Dawn is a horror story. Micah is here and it says, do you have any new scary stories of your own? Not other than the feeling my father's hand on my shoulder. And I told you about that one. That's the latest one that I can think of right now. But I'd have to give it some thought. The next one from Funky Nun, with 817 upvotes, is called How to Pass Safely Through a Graveyard at Night. I think I found the solution. Last night I went out drinking, Callum, and I followed a friend home because he got a bit too drunk. On my way back, I decided to walk through the graveyard. I thought it might look nice. I have a funny graveyard story I'll tell you after that. It did not. I felt fear brewing, but then I got an idea of how to get safe passage. Alcohol has always been a large part of Denmark's culture. I had a nearly full beer in my hand. My drunk and scared self had found a new way to stay safe. I started saying cheers to the gravestones as I walked through the graveyard. Nothing happened, but when the beer was gone, so was my fear. Did I find a loophole? In Danish culture, it is very rude not to cheer back when someone says cheers. If I were busy cheering the ghosts, then they were busy saying it back, hence being unable to find a chance to F with me. That's more of an anecdote. My sister and I were at a cousin's funeral, and this was after our parents had died. And it's like someone we had grown up with, and it was a shock. It was an accident. And but anyways, we were walking back to the car she had driven, and she wanted to take a shortcut over the graves at the cemetery, and and so she asked me, "Is it okay to walk over the graves?" And I said, "Sure, yeah, if you want him to follow you home." And so that made her laugh, just that tension, because it was tense. And I always deal with tension by trying to crack a joke. So we took the long way around, walking on the road, but it was kind of funny. Papa one says, Mama one is happy today. I finally caved in and bought her 2 horses. Oh, good news. These will be our new horses. I bought a beautiful white female Arabian named Nellie. Whoa, Nellie. And a black thoroughbred named Racer. From Lola Bunny 3000 with 811 upvotes. My nurse was a ghost. In 2020, at the beginning of COVID, I had just given birth. At this time, I could only have one other person in the room with my entire stay at the hospital. Of course, my kid's father was there, but like the 3rd day, he had left to clean up our house and get everything prepared for me and my baby. I had gotten sick and had a C-section, so I had to stay for about 4 or 5 days. Well, while he was away, a nurse named Kelly said she would be helping me throughout the day, spending time with me, so I didn't feel lonely while my dad was gone. While Dad was gone, the baby's dad. I couldn't really hold my baby due to me being sick and in pain from the C-section, so the nurses would come in every time it was time to feed. I noticed when they came in, they wouldn't acknowledge Kelly, and she would go to the farthest part of the room, and she would tell me, I'm just going to get out of the way. Now, she did tell me that she didn't specialize in what they were doing, and what they did, she was just for comfort. So I didn't question anything. The entire day, she was so helpful and encouraging to me. I really believe I would have broken down if she wasn't in there with me. She was such a sweetheart. Well, after about 5 or 6 hours, she told me she had to leave and that she would come visit me before her shift was over to see how I was doing. She hugged me and blew a kiss at my baby and walked out of the room. Later that night, my husband, the father, came back and he was very upset. He told me some stuff had happened with his mom and that he was sorry he took so long. I was upset but told him a nurse named Kelly kept me company. As I'm telling him about her, my nurse is changing my sheets and she's like, "Who's Kelly?" I explained and she said that nobody named Kelly was in my room or worked that day. I instantly thought about those women who would pretend to be nurses and kidnap children. But my nurse told me that I may be hallucinating, and she told my doctor. I talked to my doctor, and he said the same thing. Well, a couple of hours later, a nurse I didn't recognize came into my room and said, I know this might sound crazy, but everyone on the floor is talking about you seeing Kelly. And I said, yeah, she was here with me for like 7 hours today. She helped a lot. We're smiling and laughing while I was telling her about Kelly and how sweet and funny she was. Then she pulled up her phone and showed me pictures of her and Kelly that seemed to be like maybe the early 2000s. I was smiling, knowing that I wasn't hallucinating. Then she sat down and told me Kelly had died over 10 years ago from domestic violence with her boyfriend. I wasn't too shocked because my entire life I've been dealing with the paranormal, but I got chills because I never had an encounter this deep. Well, the lady gave me a hug and started crying. Now I know that she's okay. Since that day, I've been wondering, why did Kelly come in my room and help me? I kind of wish I could see her again. Tell him Large Marge sent you. That one feels a little sus to me. Anytime they're like so perfect, and there's so much like they would make a great movie or short story or television show, that to me is sus. When they're too dramatic, I don't believe him, personally. But, we don't know this person. It might be Ghosthausen by proxy. Because you get a lot of internet clout and attention from stories like these. I mean, that's the reason why I'm doing this this live stream. 11 viewers in the chat. Welcome, friends. Appreciate you being here. On Sundays, we Sinister. And that's great news, Mama One. I hope you're happy. But don't let them new horses distract you from your cooking channel, because that will take you places. Micah said, the story you just read sounds chilling but comforting at the same time. Yes, it did to me too. That's why it doesn't feel real to me. The next one is from Bad Mama Jama 080818. I like that name. This made me stop working the night shift. I worked as a PSW. What's a PSW? Personal something worker on the night shift of a long-term care home. I had a resident bell ring at 2:59 a.m. I went in and asked her what she needed, and she proceeded to yell that there was a man in her bedroom and I needed to get him out. We had people who would wander into other rooms, so I asked her what the man looked like, and she said he was a black figure and had no face. I calmed her down and told whoever was in the bathroom that they had to leave her alone. I then went back to my charting. Around 3:10, I had another call bell ring from the other side of the floor, from where the first bell went off. I went into this resident's room. This particular resident would ask for pain meds around this time, and I asked if he needed meds. He told me, and I quote, "There's a creepy man in my room with no face. You need to get him out." My blood ran cold, and I had a nurse stay with me on the floor for the rest of my shift. I have more stories if anyone wants to hear them. That one sounds real-ish. Oh, this is interesting. Papa One, you'll like this one. It's from a vet. A terrifying encounter while in Iraq. I was in the sergeant in the U.S. Army and ETSing, getting out from the military when President Bush ordered more troops into Iraq in 2003. I just returned home to Austin, Texas, when I was summoned into my local National Guard unit at Camp Mabry and told that I was being recalled to the Army, but the unit was already tasked out to deploy to Iraq. I was not part of their unit yet, so the commander offered to give me a waiver to deploy with a government contractor, Halliburton, in Houston. I knew that I would make more money as a contractor, so I took the offer. Not long after arriving in Kuwait at Camp Doha, I began working with the operations team overseeing logistics affairs. We would oversee the daily convoy of supply between Kuwait and Baghdad, a route riddled with IED incidents, small arms skirmishes, and almost constant breakdowns of Army and civilian vehicles. Because I was a SAW gunner in the, what's a SAW? SAW gun. M249 squad automatic weapon. Section assault weapon. Okay. Oh, that's the guy on the roof. That's the guy in the Hummer. And was technically still in the guard. I was often in the convoys manning a mounted weapon that accompanied the mostly civilian convoys. During these runs, we had a few strange encounters in an area south of Baghdad, known then as Camp Babylon. Occupied by French troops, but then designated an archaeological site for obvious reasons, Camp Babylon was set up in the area that was said to originally be inhabited by the famous Tower of Babel. Indeed, there were ruins that did look like a massive structure once stood at that spot. I had two strange incidents happen to me while passing through there. This sounds great. I don't care if it's real or not. The first incident seems a bit benign, but set the mood for the second. We were passing through Camp Babylon in the afternoon one day when our convoy took small arms fire. The SOP at the time, standard operating procedure, was to stop the convoy and return fire. This was because in the past such incidents ended up being a lone gunman attempting to scare the convoy into running into IEDs on the road. Because of this, the SOPs changed to stop the convoy, dismount, and return fire. While engineers look for explosive devices on the road, we scanned the horizon for the enemy. Nothing. They most likely fled immediately. However, the ruins around Camp Babylon were alive with shadow figures that seemed to move around the area. Several times would spot the figures, but they would immediately disappear. I believe this one. Because I've seen shadow figures. A contractor lying beside me with his weapon commented, "How odd that we are in the shadow of Babel and fighting the supernatural." I didn't respond, but I knew he was a 32nd degree Mason who was really into arcane aspects of Babylon, etc. I didn't feel at the time that much was supernatural, but I certainly did see the shadowy and sometimes bizarrely small figures dart about the structures. Once the road was deemed clear, we continued on to Baghdad. Bazzaro, hold that thought, and I will read it aloud at the end of this one. Okay? The second incident occurred about a month later. At this point, the weather in southern Iraq and Kuwait had turned quite cold at night. During this encounter, we had just completed the supply run to Baghdad and were returning back to Camp Doha in Kuwait when a vehicle in our convoy broke down. Once again, we found ourselves right at Camp Babylon. While the army mechanics took a look at the vehicle, the rest of us took up fighting positions around the area. Strange things began to occur. It started with a strange light bobbing in the desert. Thinking it was a person with a flashlight, we used NVG's night vision goggles to watch. It was simply a glowing ball of light moving toward a set of ruins. After initial contact with the light, a few of us had moved forward, away from the convoy, to see what the source was. After seeing it was self-contained and not a person, we were a bit alarmed. Then we heard a sound I will never forget. A long wailing began from one of the ruined structures not far away. It sounded like a woman in agony mixed with loneliness. On and on the sounds went, while we huddled in the cold and dark, wondering what the hell we were listening to. With our NVGs equipped, we used our flashlights to spotlight the ruins. If you've ever done this, you will know that a normal flashlight with NVGs looks like a massive beam of light. We scoured the area, but no source of the walls or the ball of light were seen. No source of the whales or the ball of light were seen. About this time, we were told via radio that the vehicle was repaired and ready to roll, so we returned to the convoy. I was slinging my saw over my shoulder when I noticed my contractor partner was staring at the ruins in horror. He was frozen. I shook him, and he snapped out of his stupor, quickly leaving the area with the rest of us. Once we were back at camp, and it was pleasantly daylight the following morning, several of us were chatting about the encounter at Camp Babylon before our daily operations briefing. It was then that I remembered the terrified expression on the face of the contractor, so I asked him about it. He was still obviously traumatized by the event, but managed to explain that, as we were leaving our position on the sandy hill, he saw a tall black figure standing beside the ruins. It was watching us as we were looking for him, it. He said that he felt an instant wave of despair hit him and thought he was going to die. He didn't remember leaving the area. His next memory was in the Humvee, heading back to Kuwait. I now write nonfiction books. Okay, that's sus. About haunted places for Llewellyn Publishing. This is self-promotion, and have visited hundreds of reputedly haunted spots. But I'll never forget the wailing figure at the ruins of Babel. It's also worth noting that when I related this story to some of our Pakistani employees at Camp Doha and Camp Arifjan, they also were quite horrified. One of them, a translator we called Ardi, said that we had encountered a jinn, or a damned spirit, and that we were lucky to be able to tell the tale. I agree. Okay, I liked it all the way till the end when he said that he was a writer. That makes it sound a little sus. And also that he wants you to check out his books. When it said quite clearly in the rules, no self-promotion. But imagine that shadowy figure and how many soldiers it has encountered, Soviets, the Crusaders, all the way back to the Romans. That's fun to think about. Bazzaro, I think, has a story that he wants to share. If you're still here. let's we have time to read it. How is everyone tonight? I hope you enjoyed this Sinister Sundays. On Sundays we sinister. 13 viewers in the chat. What's that about? Yeah, I woke up from my bed shaking when I was a young lad. That was very scary. I had more, I've had encounters, paranormal encounters my whole life that I have, that my intellectual and skeptical side have immediately dismissed. Even if it's in front of me, my brain will search for some kind of logical explanation. But Zaro says, I'll keep it short. Okay. Right. Let's hear what Bazzaro has to say for himself and see if he is suffering from Ghosthausen by proxy. You're not, Bazzaro. I'm just teasing you. I believe you, Bazzaro. Beetlejuice, first Beetlejuice, one of my first favorite movies. Levi, Marston Mondays has been discontinued for the time being. John Carpenter's The Fog. It's technically a ghost story, but it's set up kind of like a zombie movie. They're like zombie ghosts. Doctor Sleep is the sequel to The Shining. It's kind of uneven, but I just put it in there because I like Rose the Hat. Carnival of Souls. Highly recommend that. That movie is also, I believe, in public domain. You can find it on YouTube for free. A very young Christina Ricci in Casper. Crimson Peak. Very uneven ghost story by Guillermo del Toro, one of my favorite directors, but very atmospheric. It's a beautiful movie. It's artistically, it's just tip top. There, I love her, Rebecca Ferguson. Mama one says, have you ever considered Terror Tuesdays or Terrifying Tuesdays? Tuesdays of Terror. I love it, Mama one. I'm going to write that down. But maybe. Batzara, waiting on your story. Cloudy says, the Hat Man came to visit me. Have you heard of him? I have not, Cloudy. There's Tim Burton. Levi, I highly recommend The Witcher 3. It's my favorite game other than this one. I wish it had done better on the channel. What's that about? Mama One loves the horror and strange streams. Yes, they do quite well on the channel. Micah says, for some reason, I don't have paranormal stories of my own. You do, Micah. You're just not seeing them or paying attention to them, or you're writing them off, or you're not noticing, or you're writing them off as, I honestly believe they happen to everyone, but not everyone notices. Bazzaro, here's Bazzaro's story. A friend in my unit was put on the platoon for night missions. They stopped because of a possible IED and using night vision goggles to watch around the convoy. Oh, that sounds good. I'm enjoying this. Ringu, and the Japanese movie that The Ring is based on. Ghostbusters, of course. Dana Barrett. Chrissy says, I am myself strange and unusual. One of my favorite quotes from Beetlejuice. She was such a cute little girl. What happened? Everyone grows up, though, Paranormal Activity. I enjoy far more than I feel I should. Interesting thing about paranormal activity is you're not haunted by a ghost there. You're haunted by a demon. And so, ghosts are tied to a location, to a specific location, but a demon can follow you. And so that makes it even scarier and personalizes things. Bazzaro continues. Everyone on the left side spotted someone walking out in the distance, but didn't get permission to engage. Excuse me. I have to cough. That water went down the wrong pipe. Apologize. They realized the person was disappearing through the NVGs and showing in different places. This sounds great, Bazzaro. Miko says, yeah, some people detect supernatural experiences better than others. Yeah, I agree, Miko, but I hesitate to say that those people are sensitive or open to more scary experiences. Some people notice, some people don't. But also, I think it's inherited. Both my parents, had ghost stories. Hup, hup. Hey, come up. Say hi to Mama One and everyone. Let's recall Sadie with some potent canine bait. Bazzaro says they eventually shot a flare up to light up the area and there was no one there, but they still could see someone through the NVGs. The interpreter with them freaked out and hit the floor of his Humvee and he told them it was a djinn. Oh, that's cool, Bazzaro. I love that. I love that story. And next Saturday we're going to be discussing The Shining, partly because Shelley Long just died, and we could do it as a little tribute to her. Mama One says, "Hey to Sadie, say hi to Mama One." And Bazzaro told a scary story. I'm glad you didn't understand it, so you don't. She's not afraid of ghosts, though, as far as I can tell. And Papa One and Chrissy and David and everyone and O-Dog, she's bored by ghost stories. Well, what's that about? Mom once says, have you played Telltale 2? I'm not sure what that is. And The Walking Dead. Is that a Walking Dead game? David should play that. This is one of my favorite Japanese ghost story movies. It's called Kwaidan. I did a reading of those ghost stories on the second channel. Shelley Duvall. Yes, we're going to do a tribute to her this Saturday, Chrissy. At any rate, that's about all I have for you tonight. I really appreciate you being here, friends. We have a new Grand Theft Auto commentary, part 3, I believe. That is, I think, goes live at midnight tonight. Shout out to the mods, Mama One and Papa One. Great news about your horses. Chrissy and David and O-Dog, my friend, and Miko. Shout out to the Philippines. Appreciate all of you. Bazzaro, that was a great story. And Bazzaro and Papa One, as always, thank you for your service. Enjoy your week. We shall return on Wednesdays with Pale Rider. David, you are a good stream. Enjoy the rest of your week. I said that already. Like and subscribe.